Yeah, we're going live right now. What was your question, Ben? Sorry.
Why is your hair whiter than Rick's? I don't understand how this works here.
I'm a couple thousand years old, and I tell you one thing: natural light can be so cruel. You know,
Clearly.
you know what I'm saying. All right.
I always blame the natural light.
Uh,
That's it's why I live in darkness.
yeah. Okay. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Today is December the 1st, 2019, and our guest today is Shaun Hamill, author of A Cosmology of Monsters. Hey, Shaun.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, thanks for being here. Um, why don't we do? Okay, well, wait a second. We're going to give away two hardcovers, signed hardcovers of A Cosmology of Monsters. Thank you for that, Shaun. Um, and Matt will tell you how to do that probably when he introduces himself. Let's do introductions, and then we'll talk to Shaun. Ben, why don't you go?
I'm Benjamin Handelman. This is my cat Leonard that you see next to me here. We're mostly here because Rick is here, actually, because Rick knows everything. So thank you.
That that's very. Thank you. That was very helpful, Matt.
Of course, I'm going to tell you how to get this prize because Mike told me what to say. He doesn't want me to use my own words.
Mm-mm.
He's so controlling. You
I'm
don't
a
even
control
see this off camera.
I'm a control freak. Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to win this prize, you send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put monsters in the heading. Monsters in the subject heading. And in a week or so, we will draw two random winners, and Pete and I will be happy to accept the books.
If they put cosmology of monsters, will you reject them before the?
I
Um,
already have one, Matt. So
there you go. But is it signed? That's the question. Okay,
no,
Pete. Pete,
yeah. What?
why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Pete Rollick. I was going to tell you guys a Jim Jones joke, but the punchline's too long. So
Yeah, and we decided to joke about my hair color instead. So, or Ben decided. Okay, Rich.
Rich Bunting, I'm a patron.
Yes, thank you very much. At the $50 a month level, you can come on the show uh, once a month or more. Depends on how many $50 patrons there are. Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young. I am the executive editor of Strange Young's magazine,
That's good.
and
That's enough.
all right,
No, go ahead. You can finish that.
I think that was it.
I know you say
know
that,
that's
except does the magazine even exist anymore?
The magazine we are on. Well, I'll just say it right here. We've got one final issue coming out.
wait,
So
wait,
we
wait,
are-
wait, wait.
Oh,
I
Oh.
You heard it
need
here
a zero
first.
capsule of Micronauts.
Right, and you will be getting as many copies of issues as I have. I brought a ton of I brought a box of shit that was going to be so difficult for you to carry home from the Lovecraft Film Festival a
Oh.
couple years ago, and you weren't there.
There was a hurricane.
Yeah, everyone uses that excuse.
Yeah, well,
Hey, Shaun, thanks for being on the show.
I'm very happy to be here. It's
we missed
interesting.
Rick
This is
though.
one of the first
Oh,
things
I'm.
that I scheduled.
Yeah, we
But
did.
I'm sorry.
No, my fault. I'm having a great day here. We missed Rick's intro.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's my fault. That's not your fault.
Blame it on Mike.
Actually, we
Rick
can blame
Lang-
it on Ben because
How
this
dare
slider.
you? I'm the one that is Rick's biggest fan. I talked about Rick instead of myself in my intro.
That's true. All right, Rick.
Okay, I'm Rick Lang. I'm not the man who knows everything. That's Pete Rollick.
No.
That's both of you. All right. I'm so sorry, Shaun. Yeah. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Right now, this is the last bit of press I get to do for the book, so it's nice to get to close out the press part of the book tour with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you did quite the whirlwind tour.
Yeah,
All over
yeah,
the
I was-
place.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I got to go to the New York Comic Con. I was in Salt Lake City, VoucherCon just a couple weeks ago up in your neck of the woods, Mike,
Yeah.
in Dallas. So the Texas Book Festival in Austin. So yeah, I've been all over the place in the last 2 months.
Well, I took we went to the Arlington Mall, which I know you're very familiar with, has Barnes and Noble. We did that for Black Friday for some reason. My wife and son love that. And so I was in the Barnes and Noble, and I asked them to show me the where Cosmology of Monsters was. And I took a picture of it, as you know, and you're up there with Joe Hill and Stephen King, John Horter Jacobs, who we had on the show a couple weeks ago. Uh, so congratulations, that's great. And the other twist is that I think a lot of people don't know is that's the very Barnes and Noble that you used to work at.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I worked at that store even before it was in the Parks Mall, whenever it was a freestanding building.
oh
And
wow,
I met my wife there, actually, right before I graduated college and got my first office job. So that I've got a lot of fond memories of that store.
you met your wife there? Was she a customer or another worker?
Oh, no, she was working there.
Oh, okay,
I was mostly working in the receiving department, and she was a bookseller. And in the receiving department, I got to keep my headphones in and listen to podcasts all day, which was it was the best job I've ever had in my life. But I would take them out only when she came to the back room, which is how everybody figured out I was kind of into her. So.
yeah, the guy that showed me where your book was, he said that you used to work there, and I said, yeah, I know. And he said, I don't know him, but some people who are still here know him. So he goes, and now he has a book, and it's a really good book. It's a really unique book. I'll tell you something. It's published by Penguin, right? Am I remembering that?
Penguin Random House is the big, and then Knopf is the smaller umbrella, and then Pantheon is the imprint of Knopf.
Right. Uh, which, you know, uh, it's well deserved. You got a big publisher for your first book, and you got a blurb from Stephen King for your first book. Uh,
Yeah.
how did that feel?
That was amazing, actually. That was one of the biggest surprises. In a lot of ways, that was kind of the highlight of the whole thing so far, because I mean, I know a couple of you guys either publish or are novelists yourselves. So whenever you're trying to get a blurb, it's either somebody or you're blind firing a book into the ether to a mailing address, hoping it's right, and then But my publicist just happened to be friends with Stephen King's publicist, and she got Stephen King's publicist interested in the book, and then so the publicist read it, and she really liked it, and so she gave it to her boss, Stephen King, and he agreed to read it with an eye towards blurbing it. And there was about a week there where we were kind of waiting, but he's such a polite person. I've never actually met him, but like he kept emailing my publicist throughout the week, being like, "Don't worry, I'm still reading it." He was traveling that week, so it was taking him longer than usual to finish. And then when I actually got the blurb, I was at work and I saw the email come in, on my phone. And I walked into my office and just kind of shut the door and sat down. And I was so overwhelmed, I actually cried for a minute because I could not believe that I'd gotten this blurb, because Stephen King, like a lot of people, yeah, he's kind of a book dad for a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
I don't get it, Pete. Whenever I blurb you, you don't cry.
Yeah, I do.
He cries when you do blurb
For the
him.
completely
Yeah.
opposite reason.
Well, it's perfect. That reaction is perfectly understandable, Sean. I mean, most of us here are friends with Paul Tremblay, and he told us on the show a couple of years ago that he had that exact same reaction when Stephen King blurbed his first major book. Yeah, Head Full of Ghosts. Yeah. So, see, a lot of it, there's so much. It really illustrates, I think, that like a lot of arts and businesses in life, it's about hard work and luck,
Yeah.
because you got to work hard creating a good book, but then you got lucky that your publicist knew his publicist and so forth. But he still had to like the book when he
Right.
blurbed it. It wasn't a gimme or anything like that.
No,
So
yeah. I mean, if he didn't like it, he would have been perfectly within his rights to say no, and nobody would have said boo about it.
right.
It's not like he, had to get his name on my book or anything. So.
No, no. He needs the publicity, so I'm glad he was able to do that for you. Um, And then your publisher sent it to me. It just arrived out of the blue. I didn't know who you were, or I didn't know anything about this book, to be honest. It was before it came out, I think. And then on the first, the you you quote Ray Bradbury at the beginning of the book and H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm seeing this, and there's a paragraph by Bradbury and Lovecraft, and I was like, I think I'm gonna like this book because I like Ray Bradbury a lot too, you know.
Okay.
And then it's got one of the most unique first sentences, I think, of any book I've ever read. I started collecting my older sister Eunice's suicide notes when I was 7 years old, and you know, talk about hooking you on it and making you read it. So that certainly did it. Um, can you give us a spoiler-free synopsis of the book for those in the audience who've not read it yet and want to pick it
Uh,
up?
yeah, it's I would call it, I guess, a literary horror family saga about a group of people or a family running a haunted house attraction in North Texas from about the 1960s to the early 2010s. So it's about them running this business, but also the monsters that are sort of hunting them, and it's all told from the point of view of the youngest child, Noah, who has the most unique relationship with the creatures that are haunting the family.
But you know, it's at least to me, it felt like it was sort of presented in this reality. You know that there were no fantastical elements at the beginning of the book that I remember anyway. So then when they're introduced, they hit that much harder. You know.
Yeah, yeah, it was something that I really worked on, in revisions and with my agent and my editor and everything was about when to pull back which veils, because the book, it was important to me to get the reader on board with the people first, and then deal with the supernatural stuff second, because that's my favorite kind of story.
Yeah.
If I don't
Same
care
here.
about the people, the monsters don't do a whole lot for me.
Right.
So.
Um, guys, you have any questions? Feel free to jump in if you
The
do.
first quarter of the book, you is really a tale of obsession.
Yeah.
The guy who just gets obsessed with building the haunted house, and you've done a really good job as pairing that with his disease and sort of putting mom in this position of, well, he treats us awfully and we should leave, but he's sick,
Right.
so we'll stay. And that's a sort of downward spiral that,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was. Yeah. Well, it was all sort of inspired by this NPR story that I heard back when I was working at Barnes and Noble, because they always had NPR playing in the back room, and it was this wife. I don't know how NPR got a hold of the story, but basically telling the story of how her husband got this brain tumor that resulted in personality change, and he was tape recording himself for the last several months of his life, and so they were playing clips from these tapes as he's like losing words and like getting aggressive with the kids and all of this stuff. And at the end of the interview, the wife says, like, it's going to take me a long time to get back the memory of my actual husband and get past like the sick version, what the brain tumor did to him. And that really struck me. And I thought there was something so beautiful and sad about that, that, I knew I wanted to address that somehow or deal with it somehow. And of course, this novel presented the perfect place to do that.
Is that what started the novel in your mind? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read somewhere that when you first started writing this, it was not a horror novel. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so the book had a very complex origin story. So it started from the wreckage of a couple of books. One was a novel. It was a non-horror novel. I was trying to kind of write a John Irving book about a family running a business, and the business was originally going to be a youth hostel in New Mexico, because I'd stayed at a youth hostel in New Mexico, and I thought that seemed like fun.
Uh, if you don't mind me interjecting, funnily enough, Stephen King's blurb is if John Irving ever wrote a horror novel, it would be something like this. I loved it. So
I know, and we did not coach him on that at all. That was such
that
a
had to
great.
feel great. So
It did, because he's my other big literary hero. World According to Garp and It were like the two books whenever I was a kid that kind of shaped my brain. But so that was part of it, and the other part of it was the cancer story, and it originally started as a short story, basically about a married couple, and the husband has gotten sick and he's abandoned the family to go work at this haunted house, because he just wants to do what he wants to do for the rest of his life. And his wife has come to bring him home. And so it's them going on a walking tour of the haunted house, while he's doing like a lighting check, and basically arguing about whether or not to stay together while he's dying. And, very cheerful stuff. So, and, a bit, and whenever I was at my MFA program at the Iowa Writers Workshop, the two ideas just kind of collided, and I was like, oh, okay, so the family business could be the haunted house, and it could be this whole big family saga, and of course the illness will be the opening act of that.
um, okay, so did you read a lot of Lovecraft as a kid? You've got numerous. I should say that I don't really think this is a spoiler, but there are numerous scenes in the book where Noah's older sister is reading him Lovecraft stories, which of course made me think of Pete Rawling's dad. But anyway, did you read a lot of when did you get into Lovecraft?
I actually didn't get into Lovecraft until grad school. I'd always wanted to read him, but I really struggled with the prose, because Lovecraft is amazing at setting mood and sort of detailing these horrific things, but he's not particularly interested in characters for the most part, or it doesn't seem so to me. So like
Yeah,
it
I
took
would
me a
agree.
while. What'd you say?
I would definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it was around the time I started working on this book, I was like, you know what, it's Halloween. I'm going to read some Lovecraft. Finally, I'm going to make myself do this. And I started reading The Call of Cthulhu, because what better place to start?
Right.
And I got to that passage that actually opens the book, that paragraph you were talking about, where it's describing the dream of Cthulhu's sunken city, and this idea of Cthulhu communicating with our world through the dreamers and the poets and the artists. And I was just really taken with that whole with the poetry of that. And that's sort of where I was like, oh, this would be a perfect way to kind of encapsulate or be the wall to bounce my ball off of for this book. And so I set about systematically reading all of Lovecraft, at least all of his solo compositions. I haven't read all the collaborations.
Right.
But I read all of Lovecraft while I was writing the book. And it was really a fun way to get to know a writer. And that's one of the ways I like to write, is sort of by finding something that I'm interested in learning more about, and sort of writing kind of in that mode. And so Lovecraft kind of, and obviously there's a lot of Stephen King in the book too, but Lovecraft, I think, was more the starting point, and then Stephen King kind of took over as the book kind of went on, because Stephen King's so good at character.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my first love comes from.
There are a lot of Lovecraftian or cosmic horror books that, of course, are not written by Lovecraft. Did you happen to get into any of those? I mean, I'm a guess not too much if you read all of Lovecraft, because that's a lot to read.
Yeah, that was a busy year. I got into Thomas Ligotti and fell in love with him.
Great.
I love Thomas Ligotti. But it wasn't until after I sold the book that I really discovered what a big world of this I knew about like Lovecraft Country, by Matt Ruff, and Nick Momitas's I Am Providence, because those had both kind of come out while I was writing the book, and both had given me panic attacks when I saw them in bookstores, because I was like, oh no, somebody's already written my book. But luckily, neither of those books is actually my book.
No.
They're both doing their own thing. But I kind of tried to stay away from anything else because I didn't want to be influenced by too much other than Lovecraft. But now that that once I sold the book, I was like, okay, now I'm going to dive in. And so I've fallen in love with Caitlin Kiernan. She's great. S.P. Miskowski, I think, is wonderful. John Langan, Laird Barron, a lot of the big names. I'm sure you guys have had plenty of them on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all great.
Yeah.
You just quoted Mike's personal recommendation list, so he's
the start of it anyway.
Yeah, if you see him blushing right now, that's it's like you two should probably go out or something.
Well, those three, yeah, and Caitlin Kiernan, I don't know personally, but those other three writers, yeah, they're immensely talented. So.
Yeah, and what I realized was that I'd been searching for this type of fiction my whole life and hadn't known what to call it. And then I was like, oh, it's weird fiction. This is my thing.
Right.
This is what I've been looking for, and not finding, in Dean Koontz or Peter Straub, which, they've got their own charms, but that wasn't what I was looking for, And so Lovecraft sort of was the gateway drug, as I'm sure he is for many, many readers like myself.
Into weird fiction. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And I personally view, cosmic horror, Lovecraftian horror is a subset of weird fiction.
Yeah.
And I just love weird fiction. The Willows, you name it. It's not. Yeah. What are some of your favorite books that you've read recently?
So recently,
in that weird fiction genre.
Yeah, in the weird fiction vein, I really enjoyed John Langan's new collection, Saphira and Other Stories. I'm reading Blood Standard right now by Laird Barron, which I don't know if that quite qualifies since that's his crime series, but I think it's going to head into some weirder territory if I'm understanding it correctly and what I've read about it. I'm trying to think of what else has been recent. I really loved Agents of Dreamland by Caitlin Kiernan. I'm also working my way through that, the very best of that came out, I think, last year. And the Vandermeers, their collection, The Weird, just that giant compendium.
That's, I think anyone who reads weird fiction needs to have a copy of that book.
Yeah, I've got the ebook, but I think I'm going to invest in the physical book just because it's such a, I don't know, a big, it'll look great on these empty shelves behind me. I really loved I don't know that it qualifies as weird fiction particularly, but I loved S.P. Miskowski's I Wish I Was Like You, which is more of a ghost story, but it's just fucking great. Oh, sorry, are we allowed to swear on this?
No fucking swearing, no.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I'm surprised we've gone this long, especially with Kelly on the episode.
Yeah, Kelly literally can't say 3 words without 2 of them being swear words, to be clear.
You guys
That's not fucking
liars.
true.
All right, watch your damn mouths. Anyways, John, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've also just started getting into Jeff Vandermeer, so I'm reading the Southern Reach trilogy. I just finished Annihilation, and I loved both the book and the movie. I love how different they are, but they're both so damn weird.
I just saw Jeff on last Sunday at the Miami Book Fair, where he released his new book, Dead Astronauts.
Oh, I haven't heard about this. What's that
about? It is about 3 anthropomorphic animals fighting a multi-dimensional corporation.
Oh, yeah. Well, everyone's written about that,
Yeah.
Get in line, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, by the way, we'll forgive your empty shelf since you have a Batman little figurine up there.
Yep. He also has the glow-in-the-dark Cthulhu bank.
I've actually got the Funko, and I got this glow-in-the-dark bank that I bought while I was on tour.
You guys have questions for Shaun? I've got some more, but you guys want to jump in?
I do. If you don't mind, compared to us oldsters, you look very young. How did you get started writing? What was the impetus? Did you go into creative writing as your undergrad major, or
Yeah,
what
I've
got you
been kind
going?
of writing since grade school. In the Mike, I don't know if they still do this in the North Texas independent school districts, but they had this event called Young Authors Day where they would, all the kids would write a book and then they'd give you a little blank book to actually write it in. And up until
What grade levels is that?
I did it in fourth grade. That's kind of whenever I got the itch.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure
And
for that young. Yeah.
yeah, so up till then I thought I was going to be an artist. I was going to draw comic books, and then I made this book, and I saw, compared to my classmates, my drawings were terrible, but everybody really liked my story. So I was like, okay, I'm going to switch tracks. I'm going to be a writer. And I've pretty much been chasing that my whole life. It's just, taken me this long to get a book published. I originally started out trying to write screenplays in high school, and I made a couple of short films, which um, unfortunately are forever on IMDb, so you can go see them if you want to. But what I figured out making films was like, oh, I don't really like directing actors. Not that actors aren't wonderful people. It's just the process of being that social and being able to pull pain out of another human being, is a little too stressful for me. I realized what I liked doing was just writing the story. So, I was lucky enough at UTA to have a really good creative writing teacher who gave me, a lot of great literary writers to read, and kind of started basically, in tennis parlance, she started correcting my stroke, so and got me, thinking about language as more than just communication, as as art, compared with storytelling instincts that I'd already been working on, watching movies and reading novels my whole life. And so after that, I kept writing for years after I graduated college. My wife was still doing her undergrad, so there was about a 5-year gap after I finished college and before she did. I was a 7-year undergrad. She was a 10-year undergrad. So we both took our time. And I just kept writing. I started publishing. I got my first story published. I wrote a novel. I found an agent. Both of those things fell apart, but I was able to kind of leverage that in my MFA applications once she finished
You said you
her
got a story
undergrad.
published. Are you talking about, did you get a couple short stories published, or what do you mean?
Yeah. I had my first short story won the second place in the Raymond Carver short story contest back in 2010. It's called Unpracticed Altitudes. And then my second story was it's called We're All Fine Here Now. And it was in a magazine called Spilt Infinitive, which is now defunct, but I think you can still find the issue I'm in, like on Amazon and like Kindle Unlimited or whatever.
What about the first one?
Um,
Where can we find that?
Oh, that one was in Carve, and you can just Google my name and Unpracticed Altitudes, and it's still out there as far as I know,
Okay.
and free to read. So,
Great.
um, if
Great.
you like my stuff, I definitely would recommend it. I'm very proud of that short story, and that was kind of where what I got started with in terms of my next leap, because the people who published that turned out Carve was. Local to DFW, and the editors had their own writers group, and they invited me to join. And then whenever I decided to apply to MFA programs, they wrote me rec letters and introduced me to people and all of that. So it was something I've been working towards pretty much for as long as I've been reading and writing, I guess, since fourth grade. So I guess I'm 36 now, so I guess for like the last 26 years I've been working on this.
Well, we do have a lot of writers and beginning writers who listen and or watch this show. So that's why I asked a couple of these questions that I'm about to ask. How long did it take you to get a Cosmology of Monsters sold to a publisher? And what made you decide? What was your direction? Did you say I'm going to go for a major publisher and that's it, or uh, if a small press publisher would have snatched it up, would you have taken that? What was on your mind and what was your plan?
So for me, I was lucky in as much as the MFA program I went to. a lot of agents and editors would come visit because they wanted to meet the students there, because, Iowa has produced, like John Irving came out of there, Kurt Vonnegut used to teach there, Philip Roth used to teach there. They've got probably more Pulitzer Prize per capita than any other MFA program in the country.
Yeah, some
So
very unique people from Iowa. Yeah. I agree.
yeah. So there, no pressure once you're there, right?
Right.
And I was sort of the I wasn't like picked on or anything, but I was sort of the weirdo there, writing the horror stories while, everybody else is doing something a little bit more standard literary. And I had trouble getting agents and editors interested in this project. I started writing it while I was at Iowa. It was my thesis project. And when I started writing it, I wasn't thinking too much about selling it. I was just thinking about finishing it. But I managed to, I met my agent because I happened to show up to a meeting with an editor. And I've been, so frustrated with these meetings. I wouldn't say I'd given up all hope, but I definitely stopped, putting my best foot forward. I showed up to the meeting in this black T-shirt covered in DC superheroes. It had like Red Tornado and like the Wonder Twins or whatever.
That's why you sold the book.
Kind of, yeah. And the editor stopped me in the middle of my pitch and said, "Hey, you should reach out to Kent Wolf at the Friedrich Agency, because he would wear a shirt like that." So I left the meeting, went down the hall, pulled my laptop out, sent him an email, and he wrote me back a couple of minutes later, and I sent him the book, and we were in business after that, and we spent about a year revising it. So my first draft was like 220,000 words, and he was like, "Absolutely not."
Right.
No one's going to buy a giant cosmic horror novel from a first-time debut author with like no platform and 70 Twitter followers. Like, no, you need to cut this in half. And I did. And the book is much better at 100,000 words than it was at 220. But whenever he decided it was ready to go out, he was really making the decisions about where to send it, because was the expert in the market. Another one of his clients was Carmen Maria Machado. She writes some weird fiction. She's won some awards. So he kind of knows the market and where to send it. I had no idea what to expect. I would have been happy with like Journal Stone or whatever,
Yeah.
But and he wasn't making any promises either. He kind of, he's like, "Well, we'll start here. We'll start at the top at the big 5 houses with these editors, and then we'll kind of work our way down." And we started getting bites from those first round right away. And people, I was within a couple of weeks, I was having phone calls with people, with editors at these major houses. And, I was lucky enough that when the time came, when the book went to auction, I got to pick where I wanted to go.
Oh, wow.
And, I'd had a really strong connection right away with Tim O'Connell at Pantheon. And so, I just knew, I after that phone call, I went home, I was doing these things on my lunch break in the parking lot at work because I get no cell phone signal in the building. So, I'm taking phone calls on the sly, trying to be an author, and then going and being a technical writer for the rest of the day. And, so I was really fortunate. And that was, so it's a hard thing to be like, "Oh, well, you can do it just like I did." But I think the main thing is that, and I got very lucky when the time came, because people were interested at the big houses, but I was not expecting that,
Right.
It's like you're saying about luck and hard work, and like, the two things go hand in hand. Like, I think the fact that I came out of Iowa moved me to the top of the slush pile. The fact that, with agents and with editors, and got my book read, but it also, it took me 5 years to write and get the book, from soup to nuts. I started writing this book in November of 2014, and it didn't come out until September of this year. So like, being willing to just put in the work, because my agent kept kicking it back and being like, "Okay, let's change this, let's change that," and I spent another year in edits. So I think just that willingness to keep after it, every time you kind of get pushed down, just get up, dust yourself off, and keep going.
Never give up.
because
And that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is, and it's a lot of emotional hard work too. Because like when I went to my MFA program, that wasn't the first time I'd applied to those programs. I applied when I first got out of school before my wife and I started dating, and and I didn't get in anywhere, but I kept writing, So
Yeah.
I guess for any starting writers, I'd be like, you just got to keep after it, and realize that writing isn't like being a rock star or anything. It's something that you can do at any age, really. It takes you as long as it takes to get good and get noticed.
And those revisions that the editor's telling you, those scenes that you need to cut, I'm sure there were scenes in the book that you're like, no, not that one.
There is some stuff. What's interesting. The book is actually a little more oblique in places, actually, because we decided to. There was more world building in the earlier drafts and more explanation of how that other world and the monsters worked, and we ended up pulling it back because it wasn't. I don't know. My editor felt like having the mystery made it, gave it more that weird fiction feel, not explaining it. That
Yeah,
that
I
that.
have to 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I don't know necessarily that I miss it. It was more like maybe in the moment I was like, what? No. And then I would do it and look at it and be like, okay, he's right.
Yeah.
So it was really an exercise in learning to trust your collaborators, your agent, your editor. Like you sign up with these people because you trust them,
Right.
and at least trying what they said. And some things we tried didn't work, and my editors were smart enough to see like, okay, we were wrong on that. So
Yeah, and
it was a
plus
good
to
conversation.
paraphrase Lovecraft, the unknown is scarier. Cutting that, I think, was a very good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the difference between the Donnie Darko theatrical and director's cuts, right? The director's cut is kind of this awesome piece of weird fiction, and the director's cut tries to explain it all, and it's a terrible movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that too. That's one of my favorite movies, but I don't like the director's cut.
Yeah, it's a bad cut.
So, guys, you have any questions for Shaun?
So
Actually, I do. As a where do you see yourself in the future? Do you see yourself as a weird fiction writer, or given your literary tastes and coming out of Iowa, Philip Roth, John Irving, etc., do you want to write stories in the future in a more literary naturalistic setting?
I think I would prefer to sort of stick with the this sort of hybrid fiction, if I'm allowed. I feel like I didn't truly become effective as a storyteller until I started throwing everything I love into the big pot, But whenever I was trying to do straight genre, my straight genre wasn't very good. And whenever I was doing straight literary, it wasn't particularly interesting to me. So I kind of like this hybrid stuff. And the book seems to be relatively well received so far by readers and critics. So I'm hoping I'll get to keep playing in the same space where hopefully, an English professor could read me, but also a high school kid who loves Stephen King. Like I'd kind of like to reach both if I can.
Um, Good question, Rich. And wow, that's a really nice book you have over your right shoulder there. Autumn Cthulhu.
Okay, so
Got the best
Shaun,
background of anyone here, I think.
I
uh,
agree that Strange Eons magazine is nice.
so
Yeah, you might
Shaun,
want to ditch that.
guest Shaun, um,
Yes.
I know you've got done with your publishing tour, etc., and all. But what have you done for us lately? So like, so like, what's in the pipeline? Anything? What are you working on? Can you tell us?
um, Yeah, well, I can sort of talk around it, I guess, if I can't be too direct. I've got another novel that I'm about three-quarters of the way through a first draft on, and another one I've got an outline with my agent. So I've got two things, and we're kind of waiting to see which one's going to be the one that I fully focus on next. So I've shown him the outline for the one thing, and the other thing I've kind of been working on in secret. While I wait for him to kind of give me back the notes on the outline. And they're both like I said, kind of in that interstitial space. One's more of like a Lev Grossman kind of like dark fantasy, in the sort of like the Magicians, and the other is more of like I guess sort of a suburban gothic, sort of like a Sarah Waters book, but set, in Alabama instead of, England in the, early 20th century. So, and I'm also trying to break into the TV game, which I know, good luck. But
No, I was actually wondering if this is like, if your book, do you think it's amenable to adaptation?
Yeah, I can't say too much about it, but it has been optioned and it is out to buyers right now from with the rights holders. So hopefully I'll have some more information to share about that soon. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen so far in terms of who they've gotten to adapt it, and the writing that I've already seen. They're trying to do it for TV, so they see it as a TV series. And I read the pilot script and I really loved it. And I've been lucky enough to sort of make friends with a couple of the producers at that company, and so I've got a pilot that I've written that we're kind of tossing around right now. I mean, nothing definite, but I'm trying to kind of see if I can do that too, because that would be a lot of fun, I think, and also living as a writer.
It's a golden age, kind of, because there's so many streaming services, and Game of Thrones just hit it out of the park in terms of popularity. So it's hooked a lot of interest into weird fiction adaptations, horror, fantasy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it really is for genre stuff, like with American Gods or Good Omens or The Walking Dead and all of that. Like it's definitely a great time for prestige genre TV.
Okay, so now the other question is completely irrelevant. All right, so you were working near Dallas, right?
Yeah.
In a bookstore.
Yep.
Yet here you are living in the wilds of Alabama.
Right.
And it seems to me there's a story there.
Yeah, there's a story here. My wife grew up in the area, and when we were in Iowa for my MFA, she had a pulmonary embolism, and it has taken her a long time to recover from that medically. It turned out, she got diagnosed with this autoimmune disorder, which, so basically, we came back to Alabama to be close to family so that she could rest, and we had a little bit more of a support system. We were all alone out in Iowa.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's terrible.
Yeah, thank you. She's doing a lot better now, and not having to go to work has been great for her, because she's had some time to recover and really rest, because, she went straight from finishing her undergraduate work to having to be the full-time breadwinner while I was in grad school, and then getting sick. So it was just like one thing after another. And she was an art major, which is, I think, a way harder major than creative writing, because, you have to make these giant paintings and stuff, whereas all I had to do was turn in short stories. But I actually, I've really enjoyed living in Alabama so far. I miss the convenience of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I miss the food in Texas. For my money, Texas has the best food anywhere I've ever been, and I'm including New York City in that. But I love the nature.
Better than Iowa.
I'm sorry?
Better than Iowa.
Whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, better than Iowa, believe it or not.
So what's the biggest city that you're near?
Birmingham's the biggest one. I'm about 40 miles from Birmingham.
Actually, you may be lucky if you pay close attention. I think Caitlin Kiernan moved back to Birmingham.
To what? To you?
No, it's she moved back to Birmingham from Providence, and you possibly could get to hear her read there. So you may just want to get on the mailing list for a couple of the local libraries or something.
I will do that. Thank you for that tip. I had no idea.
Not that she's, well, never mind.
Pete, you got a question?
What?
No,
I was commenting on Caitlin Kiernan.
I've got a question.
All right,
Matt, yeah.
Rick.
Your novel deals with the theme of a child being corrupted by supernatural forces. What got you interested in that?
It's a true story.
Yeah. I too was corrupted by supernatural forces. I think, to me, there's something interesting about this idea of, one of the other big influences on me whenever I was young was Anne Rice. And I think, her best novels, deal with villains, essentially, who sometimes do the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. and who are, essentially evil, but want to do good or want to do right by the people they care about. And so I was really interested in creating a situation where this kid, just by virtue of love, both for his family and for, this otherworldly creature that was more present for him than his family ever was, ends up making some very complex and dark choices, because of love. This idea that love is messy and complicated, and that sometimes, maybe for certain people it's worth it to make the wrong choice if it helps, or just leaning into your true nature, so to speak, and just owning who you are. And I think there's also a lot of my dad was a preacher, so there's repressed Christian, oh, everything about me is bad, I'm deeply ashamed, how dare I, think ladies are sexy or whatever,
Right.
So I think there's part of that in there too, of just owning your monstrous side, the things about yourself that you're most ashamed of. I mean, it's a fine line to walk, of course, because some people's monstrous side is way darker, and definitely, more evil, like pedophiles or serial killers maybe don't lean into that. But, for most of us, it's something a lot more mundane, we're grumpy, or we have a weird sex fetish that isn't hurting anybody or whatever, So I was kind of interested in dealing with the shame stuff too.
What I might be putting you on the spot with this question, but what in your opinion are the scariest books you ever read? The books that have scared you personally the most?
Songs of a Dead Dreamer by Thomas Ligotti scared the crap out of me. It was the first book I'd read in forever that actually gave me nightmares. I hadn't had nightmares in 20 years, except about things like, getting rejected or getting fired from my job, but actual monster nightmares.
Or getting rejected while being fired from your job naked.
Yeah, exactly. All of that one. Whenever I was in 8th grade, Stephen King had a run that I read in a row. His short story, The Boogeyman, scared the shit out of me.
Oh yeah, that is
Salem
a scary one.
scared me, and It actually scared me quite a bit.
It was Pet Cemetery for me. Pet Cemetery.
Pet
was
Cemetery.
The one that...
I didn't get to Pet Cemetery till I was in my 30s, and I think I waited too long. Although there is
I was 16 and I didn't sleep for 2 days after reading that. It got me. Every time I turned the lights out, there were so many points in that novel I just couldn't stop thinking about. It was, I mean, it's not the scariest book ever. The ending of Revival is pretty. Mike still has nightmares about
That's literally the scariest book I've ever read because of the ending.
Revival.
Yeah.
If you've never read it, I would rush to read it right now.
No, I've read it. I just don't. Okay. I remember that I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's
no, it's too big of a spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember the underlying world building being pretty terrifying, and my mom's also a big Stephen King fan, and she's starting to get a little bit older, and she was like, I can't hang with this one. This isn't this is too much. And she's the one who actually got me into him. So.
Yeah, so to be clear, my mom also got me into Stephen King. It's one of the good things she did for me. I appreciate that. That book is one of the ones where when people say, oh, after his accident, Stephen King's not any good anymore. His last good book was Cujo or It or whatever nonsense. It's no. Revival was written 4 years ago and will make you cry.
It is
a little bit longer than that, but you reminded me, Ben, recently of that was the first email you ever sent me, which I had totally forgotten. This was several years ago.
Yeah.
And you sent it in the middle of Revival and said, what did you say?
I think
you were listening or watching to the show. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about how Lovecraftian it was. I think I was about 2/3 in, and I was like, well, it is, but it feels a lot more like Arthur Macon's was it The Great God Pan or whatever that book's called? Yeah. Which it does. I mean, to be clear, I stand by that. The first 2/3 of that book do feel more like that. But and you said oh, well, you haven't even finished reading it yet. And
I didn't say it like that.
It was very dismissive, and
come on.
That episode is still up there. My feelings are still hurt. I cried to Kelly several times about this.
Just to be clear, he's making all of this up. So
No,
Right.
Kelly,
Okay.
Kelly, did I cry about
Right.
this?
I
Wait,
remember
Kelly.
him crying. I
So
laughed at him.
if you remember, we do have a guest. So
Yeah,
we do.
another book you might like by King, if you haven't read it yet, is Joyland, which
Okay,
is not
but I
really
actually have a question
supernatural
for
at all.
Shaun.
Oh,
Well, that might be relevant. Yeah, Pete.
You know, and I'm sober tonight, so Shaun. I want to drift into design because there are 7 parts to this book,
We're drifting.
Right.
and 6 of them start with essentially a title page that is is a H.P. Lovecraft story,
hmm
and then
That's
you,
pretty awesome.
you have a blank page, and then you get into the story, and you do that for 6. But for the 7th, there is no blank page. It's a
I'm
black
checking my
page.
copy too.
Well, you can find it. It's the black section.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'd
So-
forgotten about that.
There is-
yeah,
There is no white title page for the chapter.
the Hound.
It just goes right into it.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah, I
you
thought
play?
that was- Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Did you play a part in that, or
Sort of.
I'm
So,
curious how this shows up on a Kindle too. Just off.
It shows up totally black with
Wow.
white lettering.
Oh, okay.
And it surprised the heck out of me when I saw it.
All right.
That's pretty cool.
All right, Shaun. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, so there are interludes throughout the book that sort of break from the regular POV, which is Noah's, and kind of peek into the minds of other members of the family. And most of those are set aside with a different font, and they have a different title on them. They're called the Turner sequence.
Right.
And that black section also goes into a character's head. And, I don't want to spoil it, too much, but it goes into somebody who's not a member of the family. And originally that was an interesting conversation with my editors, because originally it was something that was done in the main text of the previous section. And they were like, no, you should make it an interlude like these Turner sequences. And I'm like, okay, but the Turner sequences are written by a specific character, and she wouldn't have this information. And they're like, okay, well, and I was like, okay, I'll do it, but we've got to set it apart somehow. It needs to be like a different typeface. It needs to, and they actually came back with the black pages, which I thought was so cool, because there's this discussion right at the end of those black pages of a rush of white light. And of course, when you come from the black back to the white page, it's just like blinding.
right?
And I thought that was so cool. I was so happy with the publisher. Pantheon's really great about doing stuff like that. Like, they're really thoughtful with their design process, which is one of the reasons I was so excited to publish with them.
Yeah.
And
And it's to say the Kindle does all these font tricks too.
Does it?
Yeah, it does it very well.
Oh,
the
good.
interesting thing to me is that by dropping out the section page, you create this sort of urgency to keep reading. It's you no longer have that clear point where you can, okay, I've reached the end of a section, I'll take a break. You can't
Right.
do that. You've turned the page and you're into it, and you have to. You can't just relax.
Right. Yeah. I kind of wanted it to feel like, like a rush coming at the reader, the same way it's sort of coming at the character experiencing it. Especially in that one of my friends, and this is one of the best compliments I got on the book, said it's designed sort of like a roller coaster, where sort of the first half is just this slow build, and then you hit a certain point and it's just and that was definitely part of it, just trying to keep that urgency going. And I've heard people who enjoy the book often tell me, like, it took them a few days to read the first half, and then they read the rest of it in one sitting or something. So I'm glad to hear that's coming across for you.
Well, yeah, I've only seen it done once or twice before, that juxtaposition where you change from black text on a white page to white text on a black page. Matt Wagner did it in a couple issues of Grendel.
It's been a long time since I read Grendel.
Oh, right?
I
Yeah.
was surprised if I pulled that.
Epi Thatcher, or Brian Lesung, the Brian Lesung, Christine Sparr's boyfriend.
It reminds me of his when they did the re-release of Devil by the Deed, they put it in that black, white, and red that so many of his stories are in now.
Yes.
And they do some. They don't do that the inversion of black and white, but they do some pretty unique stuff with how they use the red in that re-release, at least.
Yes.
Well,
Wait, I'm sorry. What is this book? I want to write
Yeah.
this down.
So Grendel Devil by the Deed, which was the main.
Devil by the Deed.
controversy.
Okay.
When they re-released it, when Dark Horse re-released it, I should say, to be clear, they re-released it in the black, white, and red format that most of his other Grendel stories, Hunter Rose Grendel stories, are in.
Right.
well, Sean, I don't know how this book arrived at my doorstep. I'm sure it was, I was part of a list or something, but I'm very glad that it did. It took me by surprise. I didn't know that it was coming out. And I really have to say to the audience that I really highly recommend this book.
Yeah.
I really do.
I was actually, so Mike, you a couple weeks ago you previewed it and said, "Oh, look, this came in the mail today. I'm going to start reading this."
Yeah.
And you know me, I found this in a used bookstore.
You found this?
Yeah.
Wow, somebody read it fast and got rid
I'll
of
prove it to you. They put the date that they put it on the shelves.
Oh, wow.
You
Half
know.
price bookstore or something else?
No, library bookstore.
Oh, wow.
So somebody got it, donated it.
A lot of people. There are some people who are like that. They don't hold on to their books after they read it. They.
I got both of Laird Barron's mysteries at the same time.
Oh, wow.
But it's just captivating because as soon as I flip through it, the headings are clearly a link to Lovecraft.
I know, right? It was.
And you're like, okay, yeah, this is something that's going to the top of the pile because it's caught my attention and it's held my attention. It's really good.
Thank you so much.
And I wish I had written it.
That's a high compliment from Pete.
Well, thank you so much, Pete.
So
Sean, I had bought the audiobook, so I listened to it over just the past couple of days. So I didn't actually read the hardcover book. So I've been listening to it. It's very, very well done. There's background music. One book that was in my mind as I was reading this was Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. It's another piece of weird fiction. He's a Pakistani, I believe he's Pakistani author.
Yes, I think so.
And in that book, it's about people trying to get to the West, and they go through these closet doors and end up, vast distances away. And it made me think of Noah, and the stone, and the literary aspect I really appreciated a lot. So I really like the way you wrote this. It's something that I think I need to read again. Or listen to again. I will say that the one thing that left me yearning, it's not a critique, but left me yearning to go back to your point about how much you held back. So when I look at the title, cosmology, right, I'm looking at, when I see that word, I'm thinking of origin and evolution of something, right? And so as a reader, I was expecting to see, and now it's exquisitely written and I loved it. And I think we did get that for at least the one character in origin, right? But, there's that, whatever you held back, it left me yearning to want to, just see more, especially somebody coming from who grew up in the 80s reading horror stories where there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. There was this resolution. So as an old guy, I'm just cantankerous and I love to see that. And, but I would say that this is probably one of the better books I've read over this past year. So thank you.
Thank you. And if it sells enough and people want a sequel, I'd be happy to give more. I do have more information. So
yeah, I was wondering if I can't really say anything. It would be horrible to give away any spoilers about this book because it's such a great experience to read. But I wondered how there probably could be one. But I guess if you get to write a sequel, you'll answer that. So
yes, yeah, I've got a very clear idea of where the story would go for at least one more. After that, it might get a little trickier, but I've got at least an idea for one more.
All right. Again, the title of the book is A Cosmology of Monsters by Shaun Hamill, Hamill.
Mike, I got one last question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Since you deal with live action haunted houses. Did you used to go to those as a kid?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was less whenever I was a little kid and more in my 20s. I had a group of friends who, in my writing group actually, who just loved haunted houses, and I'm a coward, so I would never go by myself. But I got, I would get dragged along and go through these experiences, and I also got to tour one that was off season. It was in Arlington, Texas. Mike, you may have heard of it. It was Zombie Manor, I think is what it was called.
Doesn't ring a bell, no.
Okay. Well, they were in Arlington about 10 years ago. I think they're in Ontario now, of all places. But getting to tour and see the backstage area of a haunted house also really sparked my imagination. That was another piece of the book that kind of stuck in the back of my head for a long time. It's like, who are the people who work in these places? What's it like to have your life play out on such an interesting backdrop,
That actually kind of does remind me a little bit more of Joyland by King.
Yep. Yeah, I love Joyland. That was a fun read.
Are there any real fun houses like the Inferno?
Oh yes, yeah. Those places are very, very, very real. I think they're still in existence.
So I mean, you have Christian themed.
Yeah, hell houses. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, they're terrifying. They're not good places.
Hey, Sean, I'm trying to remember. I know it's in my email. They send me an email or two every year. There's a place near DFW that it's the same spot every year. It's like a little. It's not just a haunted house. It's like a haunted small.
Theme park.
What's it called?
Oh, it's kind of a theme park, right?
Yeah, it's like a very small
Waxahachie,
theme park. It might be. I can't remember.
where Scarborough Fair is in the spring. I think they turn it into haunted houses in the fall. I forget what they call it though.
Yeah, I forget too, but it's pretty cool. We've been there a couple of times,
Yeah.
much to my
they've got,
wife's chagrin. So,
you've got a kid, right?
yes,
Does
17-year-old.
the kid like it?
Oh yeah, yeah. We haven't been in a couple of years, but we both love going because we like scaring mom. So, plus it's fun. We're into horror. Are you going to stick around with us for a bit while we talk about
Yeah, sure.
some other stuff? Again, A Cosmology of Monsters by Shaun Hamill, and it's available in hardcover for Kindle and audiobook. So, all right, hey, Rich, that backdrop you have. I just want to say it's okay to smoke a pipe on the show.
I had a cigar earlier, but I put it out.
All right, so what else we have to talk about? I know you want to talk about Star Wars, Ben. Oh, first of all, Ben, what the hell? You're in the chat here. It says a very young Mike Dave. I don't remember being young. A very young Mike Davis bullying me about Revival, and then there's a link.
Yeah, look, I needed everyone to know that I wasn't making it up.
What did I do?
They need context. Plus, it gives your older videos more views when new viewers go, "Oh, you guys talked about Revival," and they go click that link, and then your channel becomes more popular, Mike.
Oh God, thank you so much, Ben.
And speaking of,
It's like you're turning an insult into a pretend compliment. I salute you, sir.
Yeah.
Look, Kelly liked it. Look, if Kelly supported it, I don't know how you can be against it.
I thought it was funny back when you first said it.
I don't even know what I
Now
said.
it's just become droll.
I don't even know what I said.
But Rick wanted to talk about Castle Rock, and Sean also loves Castle Rock. So
Yeah, but
considering-
before we do that, I got an article to read, this may be one of the top 5 scariest things I've ever read in my life, and it's real. The title of this article is, and this is on iHorror, but it really happened. I checked it out. Is orphan really adult sociopath? A family who was looking to help a child less fortunate than most took in an orphan in hopes of giving her a better life. The orphan girl's name was Natalia, and she was from the Ukraine. In 2010, the orphan was 8 years old. However, it was soon apparent that this child was not a normal 8-year-old girl at all. In fact, she may not even be a girl. As Natalia stayed with the Barnett family, the mother, Christine, observed behaviors not typical of any 8-year-old child. Natalia tried to poison her adopted mother's coffee. She also supposedly smeared blood and other bodily fluids all over the mirrors in the home. Goes on and on. Here's the scary part. She would stand over family members as they slept at night. And oh, man, and so apparently, I'm trying to find if there's an age here. Uh, a doctor's letter claimed the girl in question stated her birthday is incorrect. The letter goes on to explain in 2011 the patient is substantially older than she claimed to be. Uh, so it also explains a dentist visit that same year that stated her teeth were those of an adult. So, if that's
And
not scary,
the
I don't know
mother
what
is actually a writer.
Oh,
of
is she?
some-
I didn't know that.
I don't remember who she is, but she's a mystery writer, I think.
Oh, wow.
You know, this is actually sort of reminds me of the old story from the 1800s, Caspar Hauser.
Oh,
Did you ever
yeah.
read about that? You might have read about that, Pete.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
About a young guy who comes back to a German village and said he's returning to the place he grew up, and it turns out he was a complete fraud,
Yeah.
and no one's even certain if he was telling the truth or where he ever came from.
He claimed not to know where he came from. Didn't he keep saying things like, I want to be a soldier like my father was? That sort of
Yes.
thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I know there was a movie like this, but to see something like this in real life is just, I'm reading and I'm going, oh man, what the hell?
It also reminds me of Arthur Macken's story, The Bright Boy, which had a similar idea.
Well, did you see the picture of this woman who was the phony? She doesn't look like a kid, whatever. It's like
Not to me,
not
no.
even a little bit. It's like the only reason you get swept into this is you have a desperate need and this person is trying to fill it so that they can worm their way in, because otherwise, like, I never would have taken this person as an 8-year-old. So there's some weirdness on both sides.
Well, you know, in the movie Paranormal Activity, I've only seen the first one. I heard the other ones weren't that good. But to me, one of the creepiest scenes, you know, they record, if you haven't seen the movie, they record uh, themselves sleeping at night and so forth to, what was it, to hopefully catch a poltergeist or something, Pete? Something
Yeah.
like that. Anyway, one of the creepiest scenes to me was the wife, I think it was, standing over the bed where the husband was sleeping for hours at a time. You know? So, anyway. Alright, so you guys want to talk about Castle Rock. I keep getting bored with Castle Rock.
With the new season?
But I could be wrong. Hey, who wants to talk about Castle Rock?
I'll
Shaun
make
and
a
who else?
Me.
Alright.
I'll make one comment. It's a little ironic since we got the Cthulhu Death May Die series. You get all these investigators, like in Call of Cthulhu, and a lot of them are serial killers.
Yes.
And the theme of Castle Rock is we're taking the woman from mystery and having a fight a Lovecraftian type cult. So we got a serial killer in a sense, or somebody who's deranged at least, going after a cult. So I just found that ironic that both came out about the same time.
Oh, well, I guess I didn't get to the Lovecraftian cult part yet.
Okay, I'm gonna binge this tonight then. Thank you, Rick. That was. This actually sounds good.
I actually, you know, 99.999% of the time, Rick is right, if not 100% of the time. So,
It's 100%.
is it?
It's
Yeah,
100%.
you're probably right.
Rick is always right.
Shaun, you have comments on Castle Rock?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the first season,
Oh,
but
yeah, me either.
Yeah, but I felt like the second season was a huge step up in terms of quality. Like it feels more cohesive, more coherent. I feel like the character arcs kind of make sense. It feels like it's actually headed somewhere. And there's every chance they could drop the ball at the very end, but I feel like it's actually building to something really interesting instead of, I remember in the first season for the first few episodes being like, oh, that's interesting, or oh, that's cool. And then realizing like, oh, they're just going to keep doing random stuff in every episode and none of it adds up to anything at the end. But in this one, it definitely, like Rick said, taking the villain from Misery and kind of making her the hero against this crazy like Salem's Lot meets Lovecraft kind of cult. Is pretty badass. And I also just think Lizzie Kaplan and Tim Robbins are both amazing in it too. Lizzie Kaplan's a great Annie Wilkes.
You really care for her, even though she's wacko and has killed a couple of people. I find myself caring for her.
Yeah, exactly. I never thought I would care for Annie Wilkes.
The problem I'm having is that for a town that is supposedly dying, there's an awful lot of people.
That's fair.
The first couple episodes are just, well, the town's on the verge of collapse. If we lose Shawshank, nobody's going to have a job. The one character is desperately trying to revitalize downtown, and and yet there's room for a Lovecraftian death cult.
Maybe they're just rich.
But my point is, it's really, really hard to,
okay, so my brother John, this is ages ago, went to undergraduate college at Ohio University, which you might not know is in Athens, Ohio, which is butting up near the border with West Virginia, kind of. And he went out, he worked to make money. He worked in the cafeteria with the locals. There weren't students working then, it was the locals, and he got a job there to make a few bucks. And they took him out hunting, and he said they were wandering through these hills, and he said they were passing houses where there were like 15 people sitting on the front porch, and he says none of them have been counted in any census ever. So you get out into the hinterlands far enough, it doesn't really matter about the economic health of the town. You just have this.
I get your point. However, here we're talking about a town that it's just there's plenty of people in this town to keep a police force busy and a real estate office busy.
But if I remember, the ending of the first season explained why the town wasn't dying anymore.
Right.
Am I mistaken? I mean,
No,
I thought
right.
that was...
Yeah. I mean, it still takes time. The town just doesn't come back to life.
I'm still not convinced, but since it's free, since I have Hulu, I'll keep going.
Well, it looks like its neighboring town came back to life because Jerusalem. Yeah. Looks like they got an influx of immigrants.
Yeah, that's a big subplot. Yeah.
Look, all I know is maybe it's all the whiskey I've had since the show started, but I'm actually really excited to watch this later now. So
now, look, I really enjoyed the first season episode, The Queen. I thought that was a magnificent piece of writing and photography.
It's the Sissy Spacek episode.
Yes.
And Scott Lang, yeah.
And really well done, and not only horrific, but horrifying as well. To tell the story from the point of view of someone going through that kind of mental breakdown, and the tricks that she had taught herself. Just really well done.
And I feel like this season is kind of leaned more into that sort of strength in terms of like getting deep into character point of view and making sure that the people are more interesting than the overall mystery, or at least for me, that's what's kind of turned me around on the show. Despite, like you said, there's some logistical weirdness with, collapsing town that's just chock full of people and has a giant parade and all of that. But
you're right about the people. You have to connect with characters. What was it? The House of Cards with Kevin
Spacey.
It was the best written, best directed, best acted, best scripted show I was not watching. Because you could have slit every character's throat on live television and I would have not cared. They were all right. There was one person who I connected with. The barbecue chef.
Yeah.
I actually consider this like a Netflix problem because that's how I felt about Russian Doll too. I hated it.
Really?
I hated every single person in Russian Doll except for Alan. And Alan wasn't exactly likable. You just didn't hate him.
Yeah.
Strong compliment. Yeah.
So, I mean, I realized some of that was tied into the plot of the show, but I mean, I didn't consider anyone in that show likable. And I had to force myself to watch. It wasn't even that long. It's like 8 half-hour episodes. And I struggled. So I think this is actually this is a real problem with, especially Netflix, but I think a lot of these online streaming shows, because they don't get that same feedback that a broadcast show will. And, when you just drop a bunch of episodes at once.
I would agree that there was nobody likable, but I found it very compelling. I loved that series.
Which series?
Yeah, I wanted to see how she was going to die again.
Are you talking about Russian Doll or
Russian Doll?
Russian Doll.
Right.
Russian Doll.
So interesting you mentioned that, Ben, because I heard that Netflix, for example, and HBO they're like going back to the release an episode a week scheme.
So HBO never left that format. Netflix, I mean, maybe they are considering it, but people's thought that they are considering it is because they're licensed content, which is a British baking show.
Yeah, well, that's the one I was thinking about.
And there's a reality show. So British Baking Show is a license. They're licensing it. It's not the first time they've done that. Now, this is going to date me because this is actually 10 years ago, by the way. Spartacus, when it first aired on Starz, they had a deal with Netflix to put the episodes up the day they released on Starz. It's actually what got Spartacus so much attention and publicity. But that was a weekly show because it was licensed content. They didn't get a choice on whether they put up the whole show at once or not. And Netflix, after that, did all the statistics and came up that the binge model was more popular. The only reason British Baking Show is going up that way, and also whatever the reality show is, they feel that reality TV is consumed differently than scripted dramas. And so therefore they'll put them up in a different way. But it's not exactly a sign that they're switching up their model. And in fact, the shows they've released since then, it's all that we're dropping everything at once right now. So it's Amazon and Netflix that still do that. Hulu has always been, we're going to drop 3 episodes and make it weekly.
Amazon, they dropped the whole season of Bosch and everything else at a time.
Amazon has the same statistics Netflix does regarding that stuff. Yeah. And they know their viewers, as much as you hear complaining online, viewers generally, they don't want to watch half an hour every week, so
they want to binge it. Yeah.
And so you have Disney and Hulu and HBO that don't go for this model. And Warner Brothers with DC Universe. In fact, I thought Hulu's was interesting because they'll drop a few episodes at a time and then go to weekly. But with Netflix, maybe they will at some point. I don't know. I mean, things like Mandalorian are sort of changing how streaming.
Oh God.
Launch. Hey, you may hate it, but
you had to bring it up before the show. Ben's like, "So we got to talk about Mandalorian," and I said, "What's that?" And then I was berated.
I watched the first 4 episodes.
To be
Mandalorian,
clear,
I've watched 3.
I was going to berate Mike regardless of if we talked about Mandalorian or not.
That's true.
I mean, how do you think Kelly got on the show?
Why do you got to throw me into this? Jesus Christ!
Really don't remember actually.
Can we talk Mandalorian?
Yes,
See?
I am. Okay, just don't give up the fourth episode, but I'm really enjoying it. The
Yeah.
production values are great. The scripts are entertaining. They've got some really good talent. Like, can you believe Werner Herzog is in Mandalorian? You know,
They made Nick
Nick-
Nolte come across as like sane.
they
Granted,
had,
he's just a voice, but
and then they have Carl Weathers having kind of a big part.
Well, let's be clear. There's no new ground being broken here.
Well, who cares?
They're
yeah,
doing
exactly. Thank you, Matt.
They're doing good Western they're doing good adaptations of classic Westerns.
Yes.
I would even say more samurai, more classic
Yeah,
samurai
well,
films, some of which became westerns.
Yeah, some of which crossover.
There, you know,
I mean,
I could
it's-
comment that this is very Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. We will reveal who Cub is for people who haven't seen it.
I mean, if they don't know, that means they've somehow avoided the internet for 3 weeks. And
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
I applaud them because that's amazing.
That's a problem when they I right now can only get out to movies like sometimes a week after a movie opens, and if something like Avengers Endgame's open, I have to stay off the internet
Yeah.
or stay off. I'll put it there, stay off YouTube.
Yeah.
But with The Mandalorian, if you didn't like any of the recent Star Wars movies, it is not connected to them. It shouldn't affect it's not the same style. It's very much a different thing. So even if you don't like the recent Star Wars stuff, and the Mandalorian episodes, they're only 30 to 40 minutes. So it's not like you're sinking a ton of time every episode.
Where do I watch Mandalorian?
On Disney Plus, Matt's favorite streaming service.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what happened is it turns out we are Verizon customers. We got an email that you could get like 6 months free trial of Disney Plus.
I'm a Verizon customer. How come I didn't get that email?
You had to. Okay, so you had to be a Verizon customer with an unlimited data plan.
I think we got that too, but I don't know for sure.
Then go check. You should be able, and it should have the link right there for you to get it
Yeah, check your spam folder.
for
Mike.
1 year. It's 1 year.
Yeah, I will check my spam folder.
Look, you can watch Mandalorian. You can go straight into your favorite series, Sophia the First. You'll be fine.
I have
I
Disney
don't know why you
Plus.
don't
My
have-
son wanted it. It's $7.99
Yeah,
a month.
because you can't get iCarly any other way, can you? Or is that Nickelodeon?
Jesus.
That's Nickelodeon.
Who is also coming out with the streaming service because they hate all of us. To be clear.
Well, no,
do we want to talk about Titans?
no.
Okay, that was easy.
I haven't seen the latest episode yet. I can't comment.
I've seen all but the last one, yeah, which is I think pretty much what you've seen.
That's probably better for next week because then we can discuss the finale.
Yeah.
Even though I don't watch the DC shows, I guess we should comment that Crisis on Infinite Earth since the beginning.
Yeah, that's I only watch those shows every year. I don't watch the rest of the series, just like you. But oh man, Crisis on Infinite Earths! I have such high hopes. I hope they do a good job.
Well, nice. So we got a Black Friday. We got a Fire Stick, and one of the free downloads we got was the CW access. So everything goes up the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but why watch it? It's crap.
Well, look, my girls like Supergirl. I like The Flash. They like The Flash. And the Crisis episodes are decent. And you know what? I do like Legends of Tomorrow.
I like Legends of Tomorrow.
It's a complete crap show, and they don't take themselves seriously.
Right, that's why I like the show.
It was the best comedic of all of them.
You know, I thought they had the best Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover last year.
So how many episodes are we into this crossover now?
Don't
I think
know.
it starts this week.
Oh, it hasn't started yet.
No,
it starts in
it starts
December.
either this week or next week. Yeah, I think it's this week.
This
Okay.
week.
Yeah, it starts like
This week?
Tuesday or
Really?
Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have to Google the order and which show to watch first and all that.
And that's what pissed me off the most. Netflix would release the shows, but not in the right order so that you could watch the crossover.
First world problems are tough. Yeah.
So before
Well,
we get off superhero sort of
well,
shows, we should talk about Watchmen as well.
Brandon Routh, Kingdom Come Superman. We just that enough said, right?
Well, we've talked about it like 7 times, so yes.
Yeah, but that's not enough.
Well,
That's not
after
enough.
he actually shows up, we can discuss it further. As of now, you've got like 4 images and half a millisecond in a trailer. So
That merits discussion.
I think, I mean, has anyone else been watching Watchmen other than myself and Kelly?
You guys told me to watch
I
it.
have
Rick, what are your thoughts? I'm actually curious what your thoughts are.
What
best
services
best
HBO.
HBO
It's true.
best origin story for a superhero that I've ever seen.
Are you talking about the most recent episode?
Yeah, the one that was last week.
Yeah, with for those who don't, okay, if anyone's read Watchmen, Hooded Justice gets an origin story in this, and I don't want to spoil who or how or why, but I would say that was the second episode that really felt connected to the original comic book.
Wait a minute, isn't Hooded Justice the idiot that got his cape?
No, that's Dollar Bill.
That's Dollar Bill.
Oh, okay.
God.
We learned something about him briefly, though. He was promoting banks.
Yeah, Hooded Justice was the original vigilante in the Watchmen universe. He was the first that sort of inspired the others.
Look, I don't want spoilers, but I do need to ask one thing. Is Dr. Manhattan in this show?
So far, they showed I think it was a one of those news type equivalent shows where they just watch him on Mars, like building something. But he hasn't shown up in person yet.
At least we don't know if he showed up in person.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
No. I'm just saying. I'm not spoiling anything. As far as I know, he hasn't shown up in person. But there was some reference that he could change his shape.
Well, you pretty much do anything, can't he?
Yeah.
And I've heard some theories on the internet that he's really this character and that character and that character.
He could be all the characters.
Yeah, he could be like 3 or 4 characters.
So far, the only characters from the original series that have shown up are Laurie Blake, who was Silk
Spectre.
She's in it as a main character. Ozymandias is in it. I don't know what you call him in the show, and again, Hooded Justice, who's sort of like a background character in the original series. Not a lot of focus. He's just sort of there in the background. He's pretty prominent in some of these episodes.
They have some new heroes like Sister Knight. And also, Ozymandias seems to be on a different time sequence than the rest of the show. So like years are passing, like days are passing on the show. It's his storyline.
All right.
Yes.
Look, I pulled it up today. I don't have HBO. I pulled it up today, and it's like, okay, $14.99 a month. You guys are telling me I can watch all these in a month, right? Because there's only a couple left.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So wait a month and then get it for a month.
No. I would say because there's only 3 episodes left, you get it now, and that will cover you.
All right.
Through.
Am I gonna like this? Am I gonna be happy I spent $15?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, regardless of whether it lets us down at the end, the Hooded Justice episode alone was one of the best superhero episodes.
Thank you, Rick, because I said this and Kelly started arguing with me. So I just want to be clear. Rick sided with me, not you, Kelly. I win.
Fucking Benjamin. I didn't argue. You didn't say that. It is one of the best origin stories ever. If you had said that,
No,
I
I said that episode was
wholeheartedly.
worth it to subscribe just for that episode alone.
You said this was the best comic book adaptation of all time, and I said I think
said,
that's
to
a
be
little
clear,
too soon.
I said TV series adaptation.
Well,
You'll have a hard time beating the 1966 Batman.
Yes,
Exactly.
That's a high bar.
I disagree,
Well, you
but
guys
okay.
have known me a long time, so I mean, if you guys, in all seriousness, if you think
I think you may
I
have
like
to power through a couple of the early episodes. They're not that they're bad, but there's a lot of setup. But in particular, the last 2 episodes are really, really good. There's no bad episodes, to be clear.
Okay.
They're all good. It's just you may get a little bored in the first 2 or 3.
Did
Look.
you realize who Fred's supposed to be? That was the villain in the Hooded Justice episode.
Oh,
No, I missed that.
I didn't catch that.
Sean, are you a Watchmen fan?
I love the book. I haven't watched the show. I've been waiting for the season to end so I can sort of binge it all at once.
Do you like the movie?
Not a big Zack Snyder fan. I like the extended cut, okay, where they put the animated sequences back in and everything. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that version yet.
I was going to say, I'll tell you guys off air who Fred is.
I have a question to the comic book geeks here. Is anybody familiar with the Before Watchmen DC series, and does that play at all into what we're watching now?
Only in that I didn't read it because I heard it sucked.
Okay,
So
I know that Hooded Justice had a issue, so I'm curious if they touched on any of this stuff.
So it's been a very long time since I read it, and no, it has no connection. I can't. It's been long enough, and I actually checked DC Universe to see if they had it on there, and of course they don't. And I don't even think it's on Comixology. It's actually hard to find. But as far as I can tell,
Comixology. I think it is.
Okay.
Well, you may have to buy it. I think he means.
I don't want to buy it.
Yeah, don't buy it.
If it's connected, I would assume it's the.
It ignores it.
They have this device that there's a TV show which is not telling you the truth about Hooded Justice.
Right.
I would think it would tie into the TV show, not what really happened.
If I remember correctly, Before Watchmen sort of takes the same tact that Watchmen did regarding who Hooded Justice actually is. As then they kind of hint it might be someone, but they don't. It's always a theory. So in the original Watchmen comic, the guy that was the original, not Blue Beetle, what's he called? Night Owl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original Night Owl had written an autobiography, and he sort of guesses who it might be. And if I remember correctly, Before Watchmen sort of goes off that take.
Someone commented, Tonk82 commented that I like Dark Fate. So I think the implication there is I have bad taste. At least I'm assuming that's what the implication is. But
I thought I started this off with that. Did I?
Yeah,
not
it's been implied heavily several times. In fact, I think
What is Dark
the
Fate?
entire Terminator.
Oh yeah, that piece of shit. Never mind.
I didn't say it was a great movie. I said I liked it because of all the action.
Look, the best comic book movie ever made,
Watchmen.
Barbed Wire.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. Hey,
Come on.
Steve, that comment was so bad. Rick's disappointed in you.
Kelly, you're a Stephen King fan, right?
Yes, very much so.
Here's a HorrorNews.com headline. The team behind The Conjuring is doing a Salem's Lot remake. What do you think of that?
Same thing. I think of all these things that have already been done well. I'd much rather see a new adaptation of a story we haven't seen yet.
I'm with Kelly on this.
Yeah.
I was
And
going. We've had two great Salem's Lots. We don't need a third.
I wouldn't say we've had two great Salem's Lots.
We had one great one and one that I was able to watch all the way through.
Please, you're not talking about
is
the
there one
Rob
I'm not
Lowe.
aware of?
You're not talking about the Rob Lowe one. Please tell me.
I thought that was a good. I mean, it's not as. It's not
I
as-
liked the Rob Lowe one. I thought that was a good.
It didn't have as. It wasn't as well directed as the first one. I'll say that. And,
I don't look. If you're going to remake Salem's Lot, Kelly, tell me if you agree or disagree. But if you're going to remake Salem's Lot,
Disagree.
Okay, all right. It needs to be not a movie. It needs to be a limited series, like on Netflix or Amazon.
But the last one was a miniseries, and
It was
That
a
was
miniseries
15
on,
years ago.
on TV also.
Yeah, that was 15 years ago. You can't.
I agree with Kelly on this one. I don't know why you need to remake it. To be clear, I love Salem's Lot. It's one of my favorite novels. it's not original enough that it needs like 17 remakes.
That's probably true.
It's Stephen King's take on Dracula, and in Danse Macabre, he like goes line by line on every scene and how it ties into some scene in Dracula. It's great, but I mean, I don't know. Like, there's so where's Revival? Where's, I don't know, any of the other good books? What's that?
Joyland. Where's Joyland?
Well, didn't Joyland get that wasn't Haven or whatever that show was called?
No, that was the Colorado Kid.
Colorado Kid. Ah, you're right. Yeah.
It was a concept related in the same stream of consciousness of the Colorado Kid without actually relating to the story.
You know, now that I think about this, Kelly, Ben, you guys, I think you're absolutely right. I like the Conjuring movies, and I read this article and I thought, oh, this will be good. You know.
To be clear, I hate the Conjuring movies.
I hate the Conjuring movies.
Yeah, I really hate them.
There's so many.
Well, this is the Mike is Wrong episode, isn't it?
I like the Conjuring movies just fine.
Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly, I hate you.
You have good taste.
I like the Conjuring movies as well. I thought the first two were well done.
I have aggressively not watched them.
The first Conjuring movie, oh my God, I can't even.
My point is that initially, since I do like the Conjuring movies, initially I was excited reading this article. Well, excited for me, let's put it that way. But you know what? You guys are right. There are a lot of if you're going to film a Stephen King story, there are a lot of stories you could choose from. And where's the Stephen King series that, you know, you put Mrs. Todd's Shortcut in, you know, kind of a Twilight Stephen King type thing. What? Yeah, no, please don't say that. Yeah. Oh, Creepshow is awful. I'm sorry, Kelly, it's awful.
Well, the movie is great. The series is bad.
Yes, the new series is bad.
So
here's
Pete,
the thing.
okay.
Yeah.
If you want to make some money.
I do, yeah, sure.
No, if you're a filmmaker, you want to make some money. Okay, so you're going to say, well, let's make a Stephen King film. Well, you can option the ones that have already been done, probably for a lot less money than the ones that haven't.
I know.
So wait, Mike, if you want to make some money, you can sell some plasma. Anyway,
I don't think that's true, Pete. Some of them fetch a high price. Salem's Lot is Stephen King at his prime. If you're going to do Salem's Lot, The Stand, The Shining, Pet Cemetery, those kind of books are still in high demand, and those are the ones that are going to cost. It's the same reason they're being remade. It's because everybody's heard of Salem's Lot, and nobody's heard of Revival.
Yeah, but you can stick Stephen King's Revival, for example, on a film, and it's going to sell because it's
that
Stephen
was
King.
true at some point in the early 1980s. Then
but my question is,
and Maximum Overdrive were made, and
Lawnmower Man.
Yeah, but right
Lawnmower
now,
Man,
a lot of Stephen King movies are being sold. My question is this: are we going into Stephen King overload with all these movies and series?
You know, I don't know. I think I don't want to see any repeats. I'm with you, Mike. I would rather.
Well, actually, that was their point, but yeah,
I
agree.
I would like to see like the Gingerbread Man, the Gingerbread Girl. I think that would be a good movie.
And to your comment, Mike, you can't put his name in it and have it sell because Dr. Sleep is officially a flop.
No kidding, I did not know that.
Yeah, and that's with a direct connection to the
Shining,
amazingly classic Shining film, and Ewan McGregor in it, who's.
But I've heard this. I've heard the movie's good. Rich has seen it. He said it's good.
I liked it.
I liked it. I thought it was very well done.
I thought it. The parts I didn't like were the parts they changed from the book. The service to the movie,
especially the ending. I didn't like.
The service to The Shining was a bad idea. It turns out.
Wow, I did not know that it was a flop.
Yeah, it opened. It didn't even get number one for its weekend opening. So it's who knows what's going to happen with Stephen King properties.
It's got a really good rating on IMDb.
Well, yeah, I've heard it's good, but yeah.
The performances are spectacular. Ewan McGregor is heartbreaking.
I think
exactly.
I don't think I saw one piece of television advertising for it. Everything I saw was through Facebook.
No, I mean I remember some commercials during. I was like watching a football game at a sports bar, and they had commercials for it. But I think it's not the kind of horror that really plays well in theaters these days. People want stuff like The Conjuring. It needs to be kind of simpler. It needs to be a lot. There needs to be a lot of shock.
Well, I
And
stand corrected on the Stephen King always sells thing then.
Well, okay, great. You've got to appeal to the mass audience, but aren't the best-selling books right now coloring books for adults? So, before we go all in and trying to please that particular audience,
Someone
I'm not
mentioned the
saying-
Joker. Look what a huge success. Somebody in the chat mentioned the Joker. That's doing really well, and I have not seen it, but I heard it's pretty damn complicated.
Well, but it's a different type. I mean, that's a crime film. It's a completely different genre. So I don't think it's a fair
I
comparison.
know, but I keep seeing these articles that I only read the headlines since I haven't seen the movie that basically argue that it's also a horror film. So
I wouldn't call it a horror film, but it's got you're going to debate over what really happened. It's another thing.
all right,
It's a movie you leave saying, did he really do that?
okay.
It's got unreliable narrator concepts in it.
Well, I really like that, so I'm looking forward to it coming on digital video. Rick, this I hate this. Movies come out on Amazon, hit movies at least, and for the first couple of weeks you can't rent them. You can only buy them, and I know why they do that, and they make more money, so on and so forth. But I keep itching to hit. What's that Leonardo DiCaprio movie? The title just slipped my mind.
Once Upon a Time in
Yes.
Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I keep itching to hit it, and I keep
It's
not
worth
doing
it. It's funny. It is really funny.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I love the ending because I like seeing hippies get their, just desserts. But that's just me.
Psycho hippies.
so
Right.
Any hippie at all. I'm getting my hair cut this week, Rich.
So Rich, your
Correction,
favorite movie is
Manson
is Joe,
hippies.
right?
Got it.
Your favorite movie is Joe. Okay, we got that.
That's a movie I'd like. I'll probably buy it just because I love Quentin Tarantino.
Mike, can you rename this episode to "I like seeing hippies get their just desserts"? I feel like that's the.
Well, Rick was right. Manson hippies.
I was going to rename it to the Everyone Says Mike is Wrong episode, which would probably be more accurate.
Don't do
But
that.
that would
You'd
be-
be completely wrong if you did that.
There's some incredible.
I see what you did there.
What I really was getting off on when I saw that it was, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm going to be talking about. I actually saw the Lancet TV series as a kid, and I was remembering all these stuff. They they rewrite the female character. It's not a little girl on the show, so that's sort of an alternate universe of this. But the main star, whose name I'm forgetting now, he was the guy he lost an arm and a leg in a real motorcycle accident, and he was in Something Wicked This Way Comes as the guy who gets his arm and leg back.
Yeah. I'm still reeling from you saying getting off on, from hearing those words from Rick.
All right. I'm calling it a night, guys. My back is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I know you drove all the way from Orlando to be here, Pete. Thanks. We're almost done.
All right. I'll stay for 5 more minutes.
Good. Yeah, why don't you do that? Hey, I'm reading, the guy who wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower?
Yes.
Stephen something. He's only written that one book, right? Except he just came out with another one. And
Imaginary Friend, yeah.
Imaginary Friend. I mean, okay. There's a genre change for you. So I got it on Kindle and Audible, and it's really interesting. It's got a very good narrator. I started the book on Audible, listening in bed at night, which I do a lot of audiobooks as I go to sleep. listening to that first chapter, it was so damn creepy. The way that she narrated that chapter narrates the whole story. I went back the next day and I looked at the first chapter, and simply reading it, you don't get that creep factor that you do. And I'm not saying I don't like reading the book, because I do, and that's how I consume most of my books. I mean, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I read more. But it's really interesting to me. I mean, audiobooks, I've said this before, done well, really add this added dimension that's just not there from reading. I've also said before, Stephen King's In is so much better, the way it's performed.
I would say the same is true of that The Last Days of Jack Sparks book that I keep talking about and forced Mike to read practically at gunpoint.
Yeah, you did force me to read it. I don't know. I liked reading it better than I did the audiobook, actually.
Really? See, I thought the audio really added a lot to it because it really felt like you were getting his perspective on things. Rich, what were how do you feel? You have to settle this between the two of us.
I thought it was a very unique way to do first person narrative, and I thought the story was, it's like seeing Christopher Hitchens encounter the supernatural, and I hope the next book is similar. You know, there's a similar irreverence in the next book that you see in The Last Days of Jack Sparks.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Because
ghoster
I actually
does
like
look
that
good.
dude.
That ghoster
looks good.
Yeah. Well, Pete wants to go, so I guess we can't talk about ancestors and descendants. We'll leave that for. Oh, I'm sorry. You do want to talk about it?
Jeez. I'm sorry. Yes. Which I have not read.
You should be sorry. Damn it!
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna slam the book down again. You should be
I'm
sorry.
just tired.
You've got it. You've got a story in this book, right?
I do.
Okay, ancestors and just real briefly. I know we need to get going, but what is this book about? Ancestors and descendants describes it perfectly. But
there are sequels and prequels to Lovecraft stories, basically dealing with either ancestors or descendants of characters. And that is like right up my alley.
And this is published. That's absolutely true. Anyone who knows Pete, you could have written an entire collection.
It was a Kickstarter project.
It was.
They didn't even raise all that much money.
No.
But they raised enough to get them over the top, I guess. It was something like $1,500.
Innsmouth Gold, that's the publisher, is that right?
Yeah, they've done a couple other cheesy books called The Dunwich Cycle.
Have they heard about ebooks?
High praise, Sean. He did not refer to a Cosmology of Monsters as a cheesy book, so.
Thank you.
Well, that's because you're a guest.
Sean,
ouch.
Sean, thank you for your book coming out in electronic formats. Those of us that live in cities like LA, I don't have room for bookshelves like you guys do. And I was required by my wife contractually to purchase everything electronically.
Well, me too, but then these publishers, they all keep sending me print copies of books, which...
No publisher is sending me anything. So
again, Mike, first world problems.
Yeah, hey, I'm totally fine with print copies. You know, as a person, if you want me to promote your book, it's really easy for me to forget that you sent me a Kindle copy. You know?
Yes.
It's hard to read something like the annotated Lovecraft by Leslie Klinger or the annotated King in Yellow, even though I have right now only the annotated King in Yellow in PDF format.
I think Kindle handles those annotations. I mean, this is something we talked to Leslie Klinger about, where I only have the annotated Dracula and annotated Frankenstein, but they did a great job of making the annotations really easy to just, you tap on it and it opens up for you right on the screen, and then you just go away from it. And
plus,
I like that better actually than print annotations. Yeah,
it's searchable, but those sort of books are the types you want to browse.
Yeah.
By page with the photographs and whatever.
Ideally, if you've got disposable income, you can get both editions.
So, Ancestors and Descendants.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it, Pete. Your story was really good. I've read about half of it.
Oh, now we're telling Pete his stories are good. Uh-oh.
No, it was. It was like I opened the book. I saw he was there. That's the first story I read, and I've read about half the other stories. I think it's well worth picking up.
I haven't read it yet because I was reading this excellent novel that we just discussed, but it's the top of my to-do list.
And that is why I haven't read it either. I've only read a couple of stories because I wanted to finish Cosmology of Monsters.
Yeah.
So my story in there is from the case files of HPL, the Halsey, Peasley, and Lydecker agency. And it is essentially a excerpt from my upcoming novel.
And it is sort of a concurrent rather than, say, a prequel or sequel to the Dunwich Horror. I mean,
Right.
the main character. She's sort of
Yes.
concurrent.
Yeah,
It's interesting the way it's drafted.
There's an issue toward the end of the Dunwich Horror which is never resolved. I can't find anybody else who's ever dealt with it. So I've decided to deal with it and solve that problem.
Was this the disposition of?
The library, yeah.
Yep.
And Pete, that's going to be in your next novel, you said.
Yes.
Great.
Because I need your novels come out in electronic form.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I love Kindle books, but as far as promotion, just me personally, maybe other people are different. I know Ellen Datlow told me she prefers. Maybe that's not true. Anyway, I know some reviewers or
No, I just
promoters
said
do prefer.
Ellen wants hard copies.
Any
Yeah.
publisher or author, if you send me an electronic copy of your book, I will read it that day.
There you go.
But, contractually, if I'm asked to blurb a book now, I require that you I will read an electronic copy, but you must send me a copy of the book when it comes out.
Contractually, you make them sign a contract.
Yes.
Okay. Well, last but not least, case in point, Russell Smeaton, a writer, sent me this. It's called Bedtime Stories. I have not read any of them yet because I just got this book in the mail. But if you are watching the show, look at that. What an interesting cover. Interesting back cover. And then I don't know if this probably doesn't come with it. I probably just got this because he was. But look at these. I guess they created a couple of little big poster images for it too.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, if it looks like your thing, check it out. I don't know if it's available on Kindle or not. I think it is. Check out Bedtime Stories by Russell Smeaton. Russell, thank you for sending me this, and I will get into it as soon as I can. So, next week we got Damian Angelica Walters, I believe.
Oh, nice. I haven't talked to her since Necronomicon 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. That's been a while.
Yeah.
Matt,
Remember?
prizes.
Yes. So if you enjoyed the discussion and meeting our author today, he is going to be working on his next project. It is your perfect time to pick up his current novel, Cosmology of Monsters. We have 2 hardcover copies signed by the author. If he doesn't sign them, I'll provide a facsimile of my signature.
Recommended by
want to
Matthew
join,
Crawford.
you just you send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put monsters in the subject heading. We'll choose a
Sequel,
winner in a
Sean.
week or so.
Sequel.
Yeah.
Sean,
Your lips to God's ear.
yeah. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really been looking forward to talking with you for quite a while.
This has been so much fun. Thanks for having me. I'd love to come back anytime you want me.
Well, I'd love to have you.
Yeah,
Every
be careful
Sunday
because
with you.
I'm holding you to that. This was amazing. So Stephen King episode.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, is it okay if I read your private communication online, Ben? That's good for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is Sean amazing as a guest? So
Oh, thank you.
there you go. Anyway, thank you for being here, guys. Thanks for being here, and we will I'm not forgetting anything, am I? We did the prizes. We'll see
Yep.
everybody next week.
Sounds good.